In electrical systems, bonding jumpers play a crucial role in ensuring safety and proper functioning. The primary objective of bonding is to create a low-impedance path for fault current, facilitating the operation of overcurrent protective devices like circuit breakers or fuses. This low-impedance path minimizes voltage rise during a fault, reducing the risk of electric shock and fire. When dealing with the electrical panels, especially in multi-panel systems, understanding the correct application of bonding jumpers is essential. The National Electrical Code, specifically Article 250, provides detailed guidelines on grounding and bonding requirements. In a typical electrical service, the first panel, often referred to as the service equipment, is where the main bonding jumper is installed. This jumper connects the neutral conductor, the equipment grounding conductor, and the grounding electrode system, effectively bonding all non-current carrying metal parts to the grounded conductor. The grounding electrode system usually consists of items like a ground rod, metal water pipe, or concrete encased electrode, all connected to form a robust grounding network. The purpose of this bonding at the service equipment is to establish a common ground reference point for the entire electrical system. Now consider a scenario where you have a second panel downstream from the service equipment, often called a subpanel. The question arises whether a bonding jumper is required at this subpanel. According to the NEC, if the subpanel is fed from the service equipment, it should not have a bonding jumper installed. The reason is to prevent circulating neutral currents. Neutral current should only flow through the neutral conductor back to the source. If a bonding jumper is installed at the subpanel, it creates an alternate path for neutral current to flow through the equipment grounding conductors and back to the service equipment. This can lead to several problems. Firstly, it can cause unwanted current flow in the equipment grounding conductors, potentially creating electromagnetic interference and affecting the performance of sensitive electronic equipment. Secondly, it can increase the risk of electric shock, as any fault current may not be effectively cleared by the overcurrent protective devices. Thirdly, it violates the NEC. The proper way to wire a subpanel is to isolate the neutral and equipment grounding conductors. The neutral conductor should be terminated on a neutral bus bar that is isolated from the panel enclosure. The equipment grounding conductor should be terminated on a separate ground bus bar that is bonded to the panel enclosure. The connection between the service equipment and the subpanel should consist of 4 wires, 2 ungrounded conductors, a grounded neutral conductor, and an equipment grounding conductor. The equipment grounding conductor provides the necessary low-impedance path for fault current to flow back to the service equipment, ensuring proper operation of overcurrent protective devices. It is crucial to differentiate between grounding and bonding. Grounding refers to connecting the electrical system to the earth, providing a reference point for voltage stabilization and lightning protection. Bonding, on the other hand, refers to connecting all non-current carrying metal parts of the electrical system together to create a low-impedance path for fault current. While grounding is essential for overall system safety, proper bonding is critical for preventing electric shock and fire hazards during fault conditions. In summary, when dealing with subpanels, it is generally incorrect to install a bonding jumper if the panel is fed from the service equipment. Doing so can create circulating neutral currents, increase the risk of electric shock, and violate the NEC. Instead, the neutral and equipment grounding conductors should be isolated, and a dedicated equipment grounding conductor should be run between the service equipment and the subpanel. Always consult the latest edition of the NEC and local electrical codes for specific requirements and guidance on grounding and bonding practices. Understanding these concepts is crucial for ensuring the safety and reliability of electrical systems. Let's delve deeper into the specific requirements outlined in the National Electrical Code regarding bonding jumpers and their application in electrical panels. Article 250 of the NEC provides comprehensive guidelines for grounding and bonding, and it's essential to have a solid understanding of these requirements to ensure safe and code-compliant installations. As previously mentioned, the main bonding jumper is installed at the service equipment. This is the point where the neutral conductor, equipment grounding conductors, and grounding electrode system are all interconnected. The size of the main bonding jumper is determined by Table 250.102 C1, which correlates the size of the ungrounded conductors to the required size of the bonding jumper. For example, if the ungrounded conductors are 2/0 aluminum, the bonding jumper must be at least number 4 copper. Now, let's consider the situation where you have a separate building or structure that is fed from the main service. In this case, the NEC allows for the installation of a grounding electrode system at the separate building, and a bonding jumper may be required at the separate building's panel. However, there are specific conditions that must be met. Firstly, a separate building must be supplied by a feeder that includes an equipment grounding conductor. Secondly, if there are no metallic paths between the two buildings, such as water pipes or gas lines, a grounding electrode system is required at the separate building, and a bonding jumper must be installed to connect the neutral conductor, equipment grounding conductors, and grounding electrode system. Thirdly, if there are metallic paths between the two buildings, the equipment grounding conductor must be sized according to Table 250.122, and a bonding jumper is not required at the separate building. The rationale behind these requirements is to ensure that there is a low impedance path for fault current to flow back to the source, regardless of whether the buildings are interconnected by metallic paths. It's also important to note that the equipment grounding conductor must be run with the circuit conductors. This means that it cannot be run separately or independently. The reason is to minimize impedance and ensure that the fault current can flow quickly and effectively. Now let's talk about some common mistakes that electricians make when installing bonding jumpers. One common mistake is to install the bonding jumper at a subpole that is fed from the service equipment. As we've discussed, this is generally incorrect and can lead to circulating neutral currents and other problems. Another common mistake is to use the wrong size bonding jumper. The size of the bonding jumper must be appropriate for the size of the ungrounded conductors, as specified in Table 250.102. D1. Using a bonding jumper that is too small can result in a high impedance path for fault current, which can delay the operation of overcurrent protective devices and increase the risk of electric shock. Another mistake is to fail to properly tighten the connections on the bonding jumper. Loose connections can also create a high impedance path for fault current, so it's essential to ensure that all connections are tight and secure. Finally, it's important to remember that bonding jumpers should be made of copper or other corrosion-resistant materials. Using dissimilar metals can lead to corrosion, which can also increase the impedance of the bonding path. In addition to bonding jumpers, there are other types of bonding connections that are commonly used in electrical systems. One example is equipment bonding jumpers, which are used to bond together metal parts of equipment, such as enclosures, raceways, and cable trays. The purpose of equipment bonding jumpers is to create a continuous low impedance path for fault current, ensuring that all metal parts are at the same potential. Another example is supply-side bonding jumpers, which are used to bond together the metal parts of the service equipment, such as the meter enclosure, service disconnect, and grounding electrode conductor. The purpose of supply-side bonding jumpers is to create a low impedance path for fault current in the supply side of the service equipment, protecting against faults that may occur before the overcurrent protective devices. When installing bonding jumpers, it's important to follow the manufacturer's instructions and use approved methods and materials. For example, bonding jumpers should be installed in a way that minimizes stress and strain on the connections. They should also be protected from physical damage and corrosion. It's also important to inspect bonding jumpers regularly to ensure that they are in good condition and that the connections are tight and secure. Any damaged or corroded bonding jumpers should be replaced immediately. In conclusion, bonding jumpers are a critical component of electrical systems, and it's essential to understand their purpose and how to install them correctly. By following the guidelines in the National Electrical Code and using approved methods and materials, you can ensure that your electrical systems are safe and reliable. Remember that if you are unsure about any aspect of grounding and bonding, it's always best to consult with a qualified electrical professional. Furthermore, understanding impedance is critical in the context of bonding and grounding. Impedance is the total opposition to current flow in an alternating current circuit, encompassing both resistance and reactance. Reactance arises from capacitance and inductance within the circuit. A low impedance path is crucial for effective fault current clearing. When a fault occurs, a large amount of current flows through the grounding and bonding system. If the impedance of this path is too high, it can limit the fault current, preventing the overcurrent protective device from tripping quickly. This delay can increase the duration of the fault, leading to higher temperatures, potential damage to equipment, and increased risk of electric shock or fire. Several factors can contribute to high impedance in the grounding and bonding system. Firstly, loose connections are a common culprit. Even a slightly loose connection can significantly increase resistance, thereby increasing impedance. Secondly, corrosion can also increase impedance. Corrosion on bonding jumpers or grounding conductors can create a barrier to current flow. Thirdly, improper sizing of conductors is a significant factor. If the grounding or bonding conductors are too small, they will have a higher resistance, leading to higher impedance. The NEC provides guidelines for the minimum size of grounding and bonding conductors based on the size of the circuit conductors. Fourthly, long conductor lengths can also increase impedance. The longer the conductor, the higher the resistance. This is particularly important in large facilities where the distance between the service equipment and the subpanels can be significant. To minimize impedance, several steps can be taken. Firstly, ensure that all connections are clean, tight, and free of corrosion. Use appropriate tools and techniques to make secure connections. Secondly, use appropriately sized conductors for grounding and bonding. Refer to the NEC tables to determine the minimum required size. Thirdly, minimize the length of grounding and bonding conductors. Run them as directly as possible to reduce resistance. Fourthly, consider using multiple parallel grounding and bonding conductors to reduce impedance. This can be particularly effective in large facilities or where high fault currents are anticipated. Fifthly, regularly inspect the grounding and bonding system to identify and correct any problems. Look for loose connections, corrosion, or damaged conductors. Correcting these issues promptly can help maintain a low impedance path for fault current. Additionally, understanding the concept of voltage drop is crucial in electrical installations. Voltage drop is the decrease in voltage along a conductor due to its impedance and the current flowing through it. Excessive voltage drop can lead to various problems, including reduced equipment performance, overheating of conductors, and increased energy consumption. The NEC recommends limiting voltage drop to a maximum of 3% for branch circuits and 5% for feeders. To minimize voltage drop, several strategies can be employed. Firstly, use appropriately sized conductors. Larger conductors have lower resistance, which reduces voltage drop. Secondly, shorten the length of conductors whenever possible. The longer the conductor, the greater the voltage drop. Thirdly, reduce the current flowing through the conductors. This can be achieved by using energy-efficient equipment or by distributing the load more evenly among multiple circuits. Fourthly, improve the power factor of the system. A low power factor increases the current flowing through the conductors, which increases voltage drop. Power factor correction can be achieved by installing capacitors. Fifthly, consider using a higher voltage level. Higher voltage levels result in low current for the same amount of power, which reduces voltage drop. In conclusion, understanding impedance and voltage drop is crucial for designing and installing safe and efficient electrical systems. By minimizing impedance in the grounding and bonding system, you can ensure that fault currents are cleared quickly and effectively, protecting against electric shock and fire hazards. By minimizing voltage drop, you can improve equipment performance, reduce energy consumption, and extend the life of electrical components. Always consult the latest edition of the NEC and local electrical codes for specific requirements and guidance on grounding, bonding, impedance, and voltage drop.